We love spending time with you. Thank you for choosing to spend time with us. I'm Marisa Hilliard. I'm a pediatric psychologist. I'm thrilled to be here from Houston, Texas, where it's still in the 90s, so this is delightful. I work at Texas Children's Hospital there, and
hi, I'm Jill Wissberg-Benchell. I'm a pediatric psychologist in Chicago, so the Cubs are going to take it tonight. I work with children and teenagers and families that live with type 1.
So we're talking about family matters. So we're going to cover a bunch of different topics related to being families of people with type 1 diabetes. And we have some, slides, and we'll cover some topics, but we want this to be interactive. So please raise your hands, please shout out. Our goal here is to have this be a conversation and not a presentation. So if you don't talk, we're going to be disappointed.
Okay, so we're just going to start with just some basic sort of rules of thumb that I think we can all agree with. And the most important one is diabetes is absolutely not a do-it-yourself disease. There's nobody that lives well with diabetes, regardless of their age, that can do it completely on their own and do it well. So you need to have a team that supports you, that cheerleads you, that believes in you, that's there when you do everything that you're supposed to do and your numbers still don't make sense. And so we also know that diabetes is cared for within an entire family and that everybody has a role.
This is true at any age. Sometimes we think that we're raising our children. So if you were there last night, you're going to hear some repeated themes here. But this is true at any age. We're not raising adults, our children, to be adults who are independent, who are out there alone, managing diabetes on their own. What we want to do is understand and really promote a teamwork approach throughout the lifespan. So as for young children, parents really are doing most of the management. As you move through childhood and adolescence, you start to shift and understand how your team, your family, can work together between parents and kids and everyone else in your circle, including your medical care team. And moving into young adulthood and even into later adulthood, what we really want to encourage is a team, so we're not doing it yourself, that involves other people, spouses, friends, family members, coworkers, roommates. And so really keeping in mind that it's not DIY at any age. So for parents, what this means is that you go through some transitions. Early in life, you're the diabetes manager. Your child has limited self-management, and the parent really is the primary diabetes manager. In adolescence, this shifts, your role shifts to being more of a monitor. Your job is to monitor how diabetes management is going and to offer support. This is a gradual shift. We want this to go slowly so that it can be successful and so that you can gradually start to introduce new skills and understand what your new role is. Your job is to coach and back up during this time. And then as you move into young adulthood, parents become more of a safety net. Your job really shifts from you used to do it all to now you're really just there for when your young adult needs some help. And it's also that you're not the only person who's that safety net, but you want a safety net that's also made of other loved ones. I made one-way arrows on this, and I should have made them two-way arrows because, as you've probably experienced, sometimes you get up into this monitor and then you realize they need you to be the manager again for a day, a week, a month. Sometimes they need a little extra support, and that's okay too.
And just to point out, think about it. Sometimes when we talk about transitioning, right, and becoming more independent, we don't say to somebody in the second semester of their senior year in high school, guess what? High school's ending, and you have to do something next. Surprise! We don't do it that way, right? But sometimes in medical care, that's what we do, right? All of a sudden, surprise, you're 100% on your own. You have to do everything. And oh, by the way, you have to find an adult care provider. Best of luck to you. So we want really this to be planful, slow, thoughtful, gradual, and be able to go back and forth, because that's what we do with pretty much everything else in our lives, and diabetes is no different as far as that goes. Does that make sense?
We also don't say to parents in that second semester of high school, surprise, you have to pay for college, right? You've been planning for what you're going to do to support your young adult in other parts of their life for their whole life. So it's the same gradual transition, putting money in the bank, same kind of thing, putting sort of effort into or skills into that self-management skill set. So why does family involvement matter? Why do families matter? This is sort of just a very high-level summary of what we know from the behavioral science data. You learned a lot about basic science data this morning. We are behavioral scientists. So what we know from our research, we hope is a little bit more our graphs are a little clearer. We don't have quite as many arrows. But what we know is that developmentally appropriate parent involvement in type 1 diabetes management is associated with less family conflict. So if you're able to support your teen and work with them or your child or your young adult at the level that's appropriate for where they are in their development, diabetes conflict will be decreased. It won't be gone. It's still going to happen, but it will be decreased. And it also means that it's easier to work as a team, to work together for diabetes care. We know that these lead to better type 1 diabetes management. When you work as a team, when you support each other, and when you're matching your child's developmental needs, it's easier to do all the things you have to do for diabetes management, and that is related to in range or closer to range glycemic control and higher quality of life. You'll notice that we think these are equally important. We put these equally together as the outcome we're aiming for. A1C close to range and good quality of life. The FDA is beginning to understand this and also is supporting that these are equally important outcomes. And we just want to make sure that that's really clear, that when we say, how's your kid doing? And you say, oh, great, they have a 6.5, that's half the story. We also want to know how they're doing in life. Does that make sense?
So sometimes we argue. Right? Sometimes we're worried about our children, and the way in which we express our concern is not quite the way in which they hear us being concerned about. But the problem is that there's lots and lots of research in psychology and diabetes that lets us know that when parents and their teenagers, especially teenagers, start to really argue and disagree, teenagers start to do less self-care. So by the virtue of the arguing and the nagging, they actually do less. And when you check blood sugars less and miss insulin, your blood sugars go higher. And you also have worse psychosocial outcomes like quality of life, more diabetes distress, and even maybe higher rates of depression. So I'm going to give you just sort of some examples of this.
I told you our graphs had fewer arrows.
So let's say, for example, I'm a parent and I am worried about my child because I think that maybe they're not bolusing at lunch. How many of you have teenagers? How many of them actually you're absolutely sure pre-bolus every day at lunch in school? Right, okay. So, all right, so I'm worried about that because I know that if you don't bolus at lunch, your blood sugars, at least for some of the day, is going to be higher. And I'm thinking in my head about long-term things, and so I am concerned about their long-term health and safety. But the way in which I express my worry, fear, and concern is something like, did you check your blood sugars? Are you sure you checked your blood sugars? Did you take your insulin? I don't think you took your insulin. Why didn't you take your insulin? Why didn't you take your blood sugars? Where's your meter? What do you mean you don't know where your meter is? Is your meter in your backpack? Your meter's not in your backpack. Did you leave your meter in your locker? Did you leave it under your chair? If I go to your locker right now and I go and open your locker, am I going to also find that missing math test that you said you couldn't find? Right? So, have you ever engaged in that? Okay, right. So that's because I love my child. That's because I want them to do well. That's because sometimes I lose sleep over whether or not they're going to be okay. But that's not what they hear. What they hear is, you suck. You're stupid. You're irresponsible. You're not motivated. I can't trust you. So if that's the message I hear as a teenager, when I have a challenge and I need help making a good decision and problem solving. I'm in Houston. It's 98 degrees. Everybody's sweating. I have $4 in my pocket. I'm with my friends, and I go by a 7-Eleven, and the Slurpee machine is going, Jill, I am so refreshing right now. Oh my gosh, I am going to taste so good, and you need to have me. I am not going to call and go, Mom, I must have a Slurpee. What the heck do I bolus? Because if I do that, and I've already heard that nagging, I am automatically going to assume I'm going to hear, what? You're going to do a Slurpee? What are you thinking? You know that you woke up at 275 today, and now you're going to do a Slurpee? We're never going to get your numbers, right? And so I am not going to call for help. Still going to have a Slurpee. I'm not going to bolus for it, or I'm not going to bolus enough for it, and I'm not going to tell you, right? Okay, so I am feeling discouraged. I'm really frustrated. I don't feel like I have a support from my parent. You are not part of my team. So I don't quite tell you all of the things that are going on in my life because I don't want to hear the message that I think I'm hearing, which is that I'm irresponsible and untrustworthy. And so what happens to me as a parent? My anxiety ratchets up exponentially. And then our frustration and our messages of not trusting each other, not working well as a team, bleed into other parts of our lives above and beyond diabetes. So now as a parent, I'm scared, worried, and pretty miserable. And as a teenager, I'm pretty pissed off and fairly miserable and really feeling like I'm on my own because I don't feel like I can partner with my parent because we're not working together as a team to problem solve this thing that really sucks, which is diabetes. Does this make sense? Yeah, go ahead.
No, sorry, I thought you were done.
I was going to say, this is not psychopathology. This is not going into psychotherapy because there's something wrong. This is not bad parenting. This is none of those things. This is not shame. We're not talking about this to make you feel guilty or shamed. This is because we love our children. But the question is, and the challenge is, how do we not get sucked into that? How do we give a message of concern and worry in a way that our children can hear it honestly as what it is, as opposed to blaming? Does this make sense? Okay.
We can see a lot of places this cycle goes off the rails. Ooh, if I hadn't done that. Ooh, if my child hadn't done that. Ooh, if this hadn't done that. It's diabetes' fault. It's not parents' fault for loving your child and nagging and kids reacting this way. It's diabetes' fault. There's places that we can make some changes, but I want to emphasize the point here isn't to say parents are screwing kids up by reacting this way. That's not the message here. The message here is diabetes is really hard. Diabetes puts so many demands on you and your family and forces you to parent in a way that might not feel natural, that you really have to think about and work hard at. And it forces your child to hear you in a different way, and it requires work. But I just want to point out the top of this circle, the bright red one is diabetes, not you. Does that make sense? So we are going to get to some ways to try to prevent this circle or keep it on the rails. And so what we're going to really focus on here is positive parent involvement. And we really think of positive parent involvement as having three main kind of components. The first being acceptance. And that's acceptance that diabetes is hard and diabetes sucks and diabetes is a ton of work. And not fighting that, just accepting that that's part of life. You don't have to like it, but sort of accepting this is what we have and we have to figure out how to work with it, work around it, work through it. To do that, one of the key things is open communication. Open communication means communication with your healthcare team, openly, not telling them what they want to hear, telling them what's really happening, modeling for your child that that's okay. Modeling for your child that even if the doctor kind of looks horrified when I say we didn't do such and such thing or we did such and such thing, that it's better to tell them and have that communication and figure out a solution than to be embarrassed and not share it. It also means communication if you have more than one parent or caregiver, between parents and caregivers, so that what you are doing and modeling and sharing with your child is one message. And it's developing communication with your child that matches where they are developmentally. That's going to look different in preschool and middle school and high school, and we'll talk through that a little bit. And then the last is supportive monitoring. Supportive monitoring. So you want to monitor what's happening with diabetes care, and you want to be supportive. So we'll talk through that a little bit too. All of that links with better adherence to the treatment regimen, in-range A1C, and better quality of life. Before we get into a little bit more, are there questions at this point? Comments? What is this bringing up for you? Yeah.
I'd be really interested to hear you talk about convincing your fiercely independent team or child that it really is a team sport, that it needs to be a team sport.
So the question, I'm just going to repeat it, is how do you, if you have a fiercely independent person in your home that is the person with diabetes, how do you convince them that actually it's a team job, that diabetes really is about teamwork and not do it yourself?
So independence is a wonderful thing. Fierce independence is something we don't want to squash. We want to nurture it, right? We want to help our children become adults that can be out there in the world and be successful. And so part of it is finding what it is that they can be independent with and really supporting that. And then saying there are other parts that I have to help you with. That's my job as a parent. And focusing on sort of separating out the things that they can do independently that you can really build and the things that really are non-negotiable that you're going to be involved in. And negotiating, where you can, what that involvement looks like. So independence might mean, that fierce independence that you're supporting, that your teen or your child can do some things on their own, but that you need to be part of the conversation. So you don't have to do everything. You don't have to see everything. You don't have to be on their back every time they check their blood sugar or dial up a bolus or whatever it is. You just need to be a part of the conversation.
The other thing is we are just nicer people to hang out with as parents when we're not worried about our children. So if they want us to be nicer to them, if they want to enjoy being with us, and if they want us to say yes more often, it's not in their best interest to worry us or piss us off. Right? Okay. So if it is their best interest at heart and they do a better job of communicating to you that they are safe and they are doing well, then you are more likely to be less annoying and irritating and more likely to say yes. So the benefit is to them to be better at communicating with you that they are doing well and making safe decisions, right? The other thing is, by the way, the hallmark of being a true grown-up is knowing when you can do things on your own and doing it, and knowing when you need help. And when you need help, not only asking for it, but finding the right people to help you, right? And successful grown-ups, this has nothing to do with diabetes, understand that. So the idea of true, honest-to-God, complete independence is kind of baloney. Yeah.
I just wanted to comment. I'm a nurse and I work with diabetics and unfortunately dialysis patients too. But one thing that I've realized with a lot of common characteristics, because the people I take care of are adults now, is they've almost been told that they kind of have to have this lifestyle where someone is always telling them what they have to do. And they've had a position of a lack of control. So say when we're a parent and we have worry and fear, it's like we're almost just continuing to tell them what they have to do and not balancing out, hey, I'm going to let you have some control with this. And if I worry and I'm fearful all the time, then it becomes all about me. So kind of stepping back and maybe asking them, hey, what is going on? I mean, maybe just wanting to have that Slurpee, maybe there's something else behind it. Like, hey, I had an awful day at school, or, I feel like maybe I deserve this or something. And so kind of affirming them, telling them how brave they are, and just, it's hard not to, worry, but I just think that open communication where you're kind of getting more on their level and not being at such a point where you're becoming more the emphasis, because you're just like, I'm worried, I'm fearful, and your child is just like, what's up? And, it's just kind of interesting, the patterns that I've seen through patients of mine that have had diabetes their whole life, and they get into this role where everybody's just telling them what they have to do. You have to bolus, you have to,
yes.
I don't know if that makes sense.
You hit on some really, really, really important points. I think the first thing you said that caught my attention that I want to respond to is this idea of people telling you what to do. When we talk about supportive monitoring, we don't mean supportive dictatorship. What we mean is supportive monitoring what they're doing. So starting early, teaching the skills for your child and teen to be able to make some of those decisions and start to problem solve situations. Early on, you're going to problem solve out loud. Oh, I see this number. I see that your CGM is at 70 with an arrow down, and I know that you have some exercise coming up, so this is what we're going to do next. Talking out loud to model how you're problem solving. And then you engage them in problem solving. This is what I see happening. What do you think we should do next? And talking through it. So what you want to do during that gradual movement up the self-management slope that we're going to do throughout childhood and adolescence is help them learn to be able to make some management decisions with you as a backup and a coach, but not telling them this is what you have to do so that they have no idea, and then all of a sudden they're in college or out in the workplace and they have to figure it out on their own and they don't know how. But rather what you want to do is build that skill set slowly over time. So that was sort of the first thing you said that stood out to me.
Yeah, the other thing is just in general parenting, if you can put parenting styles into 3 buckets, it's not fair to say this, but just to make it simple, there's permissive parenting. You can do whatever you want. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I believe in you. You can sort of make your own decisions, and I'm going to say yes to pretty much anything. So it's permissive, right? Very little positive comes out of real permissive parenting when you look at the research. There is authoritarian parenting, which is it's my way or the highway. You're going to do exactly what I say because I'm the boss of you and we have no negotiation. I don't need to tell you why it is I'm making these decisions because I'm the boss of you and that's all there is. These are exaggerations, okay? And then there's something called authoritative parenting, which is where I have enormous respect for the young person I am raising. And I am going to do everything I can to train them and work with them and partner with them so that they can become great problem solvers by facilitating and respecting their ability to make great decisions and guiding them along the way. And when they make really boneheaded decisions, to be able to say, how'd that work for you? Not so well, huh? You're puking a lot because you were drinking all night? Yeah, that sucks for you, doesn't it? What are you going to do tomorrow when you get invited to that party? You know, I'm giving silly examples, but so the idea is that authoritative, parents, parenting styles tends to raise individuals. This has nothing to do with diabetes, but, right? Raises individuals that engage in better problem solving, better decision making. They're less likely to get into trouble. They're less likely to engage in risk-taking behaviors. They're more likely to actually get a college degree and beyond. So any way that we can give our children the message that we really do think at the bottom line at the end of the day, they have the capacity to make good decisions, because pretty much children want to do well. They want to be successful. And so we're guiding them and giving them the tools and skills to be able to do that.
I like to think of authoritative parenting as warm, firm, and loving. You're warm, you're firm. There's expectations of what's going to happen if you do this and if you do that. This is the consequence if you break a rule. This is the privilege if you follow our expectations in our household. And loving. Whatever happens, I still love you. And I think that's really kind of captures all of these. The warm, firm, and loving are sort of the pieces that pull together to be supportive but to still monitor, to clearly communicate and to accept your child as they are, diabetes and all. So what do? Let's get a little more concrete. We're going to talk about development, because what you do differs at different ages. We gave you kind of the 30,000-foot view with the overarching strategy or overarching concepts, but the strategies here sort of change. So across development, you'll see that as your child has new developmental abilities coming online, what you do will be slightly different too. So in preschool and elementary school, they have early cognitive skills, they have limited ability to communicate, and it's nearly all adult care with some youth involvement. Middle school, developing autonomy, increasing social influence, and can do many tasks with supervision. And in high school, they become more independent, have more competing demands, and have to start to balance the autonomy, the fierce independence that you were talking about, with self-care, with monitoring. So we'll talk about each one of those. So, you want to do preschool?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So in preschool, some of the developmental issues are limited self-awareness. Young children are really not able to say, I feel high, I feel low, I feel sick. They might just be acting out in a way that's hard to decipher. They're learning how to communicate their feelings and needs, learning how to say, this is what I need from you right now, Mom. What I really need is for you to rub my back, or what I really need from you is check my blood sugar and give me some glucose, right? That's not something that young children are able to do, but they learn. They learn emotion regulation skills, how to calm down when they're upset. That's a really important part of preschool, is learning how to calm down when you're in a big group of people and you're feeling overstimulated and you need to chill. They might be developing fears, so you might have children that are afraid of needles, or afraid of blood glucose checks, and afraid of insertions. And they might have picky eating and unpredictable behavior. Has anyone experienced any of these? Yes, congratulations, you've been through young childhood. So what do? One of the things that we encourage for families to do is to not allow diabetes tasks to be the primary source of attention. Make a concerted effort. Even though you are thinking about diabetes 24/7, make a concerted effort for your child to get some attention from you that has nothing to do with diabetes. Give them praise about something that has to do with coloring, or that has to do with playing with a friend or being nice to their sibling, and make that the primary source of attention. Manage diabetes, demonstrate what you're doing with diabetes, but make a concerted effort to not make everything about diabetes. Offer choices when possible. So sometimes this is about which finger do you want me to prick you on, or where do you want me to insert your sensor. Other times it might be things like, these are your 2 food choices. You get one of them. You have to pick one of them. If not, I have some milk you can have, or a glucose tab you can have. Using clear, simple language around diabetes. So even as you're narrating how you're problem solving and how you're being a parent of a child with diabetes, so that they can learn how to be a person with diabetes, using language that they can make sense of. One of the best ones I heard recently was when a kid says, what's that thing on your arm, to a CGM or a pod? It's a fancy sticker that helps my body grow. It's like a pretty cute, young, child-friendly way. Oh, a fancy sticker that helps your body grow. Cool. Let's move on. I want one too, yeah. Use distraction. Yeah, no one actually wants one, right? Use distraction. You don't always have to help your child, as they're learning those self-regulation skills, learn how to calm down when they're upset, especially in these very young preschool children. Distract them, give them an iPad, play a funny song, do a silly face-off, do a dance, whatever it takes to get the task done is often easier than having to get them through the challenging situation and teach them every single time about emotional regulation. And then, when possible, if you have people that you can ask, share the daily demands. Ask other people to help you out. If you have two parents in the household, alternate who gets up at night or who does the nighttime whatever, so that you can get some rest and take care of yourself. And we'll come back to that part at the end.
So elementary school. So children are starting to spend more and more time alone, away from mom and dad's supervision. Do you remember your very first time riding your bicycle around the corner when mom and dad weren't watching? Do you remember that when, like, nobody could see you? Do you remember that? Do you remember watching your kid do that and you're thinking, oh my God, I can't see them. Are they coming back? Oh my God, right? And then they're so excited as they're riding, back and they're like, I did it. And you're like, oh. So they're spending more and more time away from us. They're also more aware of differences between people. So especially in the early elementary school years, children are categorizing their world. So for example, I'm a girl and you're a girl and that makes us the same, but my hair is really black and your hair is much blonder and that makes us different. So we're making these comparisons about my skin is lighter than yours or darker than yours, I'm taller, I'm smaller, I'm faster, I'm better at reading, different things like that. So we're putting people in categories. And that's part of our children's developmental task of understanding where they fit into the world and how they're the same and how they're different. And having diabetes often is one thing that makes your child different from everybody else, not only in their grade, but often in their school. The other issue is fairness. So how many of you have just hung out on an elementary school playground and watched kids play? It's really fun as long as nobody thinks you're creepy, right? So no, but it's really interesting. And if you listen really carefully to the conversations that are happening as children are playing, you're going to get lots of conversations about the concept of fairness. Are you playing by the rules? Don't cheat. That's not the way I play. That's not fair. You're doing it wrong. Because for children, they are organizing the world because the world is supposed to be fair. And people are supposed to play by the rules. And we do not want our children to have to realize at such a young age, the world is not fair. And yet our children with diabetes have to face that fact every day. And that's hard. They're also learning self-control, sort of, how do you handle strong feelings, strong emotions, impulses. They're still pretty concrete in their thinking and understanding about diabetes because they really have some very basic skills in math. So how do we help them? Well, one of the things that we can do is just have structure, routine, and consistency. That's not just true for toddlers and preschoolers. Even us grown-ups, oftentimes we do better when we have predictable days and we know what's going on and we do kind of the same-ish stuff around the same-ish time every day. Including your child in all of your family problem solving and discussions, thinking aloud, talking aloud, and saying, even playing the who can guess the carbs closer at dinner time? Like, wow, Dad really, he's not a good carb counter, is he? No, I'm better than he is. Those kinds of, and just having those kinds of conversations and discussions around problem solving. And then sometimes just clarifying who is actually responsible for different tasks at different times, who renews the supplies, who calls in the prescription, all of those different things, and also what your child can do independently and what they still need help and support, and continuing that through the lifespan.
In the preteen years and in middle school, the big P word, puberty happens, which just screws everything up. Insulin requirements are 2 to 3 times higher during puberty. So you start to know that your child's in puberty, not just because they have body hair and they're moody, but because their insulin requirements shoot way up. And so then you can know that all of these other mood and behavioral changes are going to come along, but also that it becomes 2 to 3 times, probably exponentially, more difficult to manage diabetes. So everything they learned up until this point is good and helpful, but they now have to work 2 to 3 times harder at the same time that all this other stuff is happening, because middle school years are so crazy difficult. They're so stressful, and they really introduce so many changes into preteens' lives. So they have increasing self-awareness, they have an increasing ability to detect their symptoms, but they're still pretty concrete thinkers. There's a lot of variation, so some middle schoolers are becoming very sophisticated, and some might be concrete. And within even a middle schooler, you might see some change. One day they're able to be pretty sophisticated and kind of nuanced and talk with you about kind of high-level things, and the next day they're just like, I don't feel good. And you have to sort out, is that what's happening here? Why yesterday could you tell me I think I'm having a low and you were dead on, and today you're totally off? They have improving yet imperfect skills. So when you might say, oh, my child can check their blood sugar and make a bolus calculation and figure it all out on their own, that's an improvement over where they used to be. But they're imperfect, so they still need quite a bit of help during this time to make sure that all of their skills and their calculations are correct, and that all of their decision making is the way you would make it too. Peers have increasing influence, but they also want more privacy. So they're spending more time with friends, more time with their door shut, and less time with you. So that's certainly a challenge for parents. They're experimenting with autonomy in the same way. This is when the risk for psychosocial distress increases. So this is when you need to sort of keep your eye out and say, is that just moodiness because they're a teenager and they're going through puberty, or is that moodiness because they're really distressed about something going on in their life? Maybe something at school, or maybe something about having diabetes. And they also have increasing demands: sports and after-school activities and theater and youth group and friends and a million other things that keep them busy all day long, that move diabetes with each one further and further down their priority list. So in terms of family considerations, one of the things you want to think about is matching self-care responsibility expectations, what you expect them to do in terms of self-care, with what their current level of ability is. So that means you can learn over time, but also knowing that current level of ability can shift day to day. They might be able to do something one day and need more help with it the next. You want to make sure you continue to oversee, monitor, and support, and step in or take over when necessary. Not in a you did it wrong, you dummy kind of way, but in a I think you might need an extra helping hand today kind of way. We want to find this strength here. So we have the increasing influence of peers. That's wonderful. What that means is when they're not with you, they have people who care about them, hopefully, who they're spending time with, who you can rally, who you can help them start to be extra supporters for diabetes management when you're not with them. What that means is teaching your child how to ask for help from their friends, how to disclose their diabetes with confidence and not shame, and ask for help from people. Also developing communication strategies with the preteen's input. So, do you want me to text you this way? What emoji do you want me to send you when I'm concerned about you? How do you want us to communicate in a way that's not going to irritate you, but instead allow us to have that open communication?
Because when you communicate with me, I am less worried about you, and I'm less worried about you, I'm much nicer to hang out with, and I'm more likely to say yes, right? Going back to that idea. So, high school. For most children, puberty is ending by the end of high school, although for some boys, it's actually just starting in high school and they're not done until they're a little bit older. There is a lot more self-awareness. Some of us might call that selfishness, but more self-awareness. They have way more advanced analytical skills. They have lots and lots and lots of things going on. For high schoolers, there are literally days when they are flying out the door to get to class because they overslept. They do not eat, they do not check, they do not bolus. They probably haven't closed their backpack, and their homework that's due is flying out as they're flying out the door. And the next time you see them, you're crashed out on the couch because after school they had a sport, and then after sport they had a study group, and after study group they went and visited their boyfriend or girlfriend, and now they're home and you are like done for the day. So you've literally laid eyes on your child for maybe 7 to 10 minutes in that entire 24 hours. And that's developmentally typical for lots of our high schoolers. They have higher risk for some challenges in managing how they're doing emotionally and psychosocially, in part because they have so many things going on. So one of the challenges, I think, for us as parents is to sort of respect their increasing need for autonomy and their increasing independence, but also planning and communicating, how can I support you? So now say, how many of you have children that are currently in high school? Okay, so junior year I find is the one that's the most challenging of all the high school years because everybody's talking to them about what's going to happen after high school and preparing for SATs and ACTs, and you're talking about doing college visits, not at the second year of junior year, second semester, then over the summer before senior year. And there's just a lot of what are you going to be when you grow up and how are you going to be a complete adult kinds of questions that our kids get. And if they're in AP classes or honors classes, there's even more stress. So this is a time when I find that many, many teenagers need to look at you as parents and say, I am giving you everything diabetes related for the next 2 weeks. So if you're poking my finger, if the child's checking blood sugars, it clearly needs to be time to check. Or if you're changing my Dexcom, then I guess it's time for me to do a site change. If you're, bolusing insulin for me, whatever you're doing, then I guess it's time. If you're throwing food in front of my face, it must be time to eat. But I can't do the actual diabetes tasks for a while because I'm so overwhelmed with all of the demands in my life. It's all I can do to get those things done. And the cool thing is, if through the years you have maintained that open communication, that active problem solving, that collaborative message of we're in this together, and there are times when you're going to be fine, and there are times when you're going to need help. And so I'm so proud of you for asking for help, because truly at the end of the day, who cares who's the one that actually administers the insulin? Who cares who's the one that checks the numbers? Who cares who's the one that makes those decisions? What we care about is that it gets done, not who does it. Right? And so our children really do benefit a lot, especially during high stress times, to know that you can step in whenever they need to, and that you are absolutely, totally delighted and willing to, and that when they're ready to take it back, they'll let you know.
That also goes back to the point you asked about how do you prove to them that it's a team sport? By showing them that it's a team sport sometimes and saying, you can sit on the bench this time, I'll do it. Let me show you how I can help you. So that says later in life, when you need to take a bench day and you need help from someone, you can ask for it and they will do it for you. So it's demonstrating through example.
Right, right. The setting clear expectations for self-management with consistent consequences. So to me, one concrete example is your children are learning how to drive. You just don't have the privilege of putting a key in an ignition if you don't know what your blood sugars are at that moment. Not what they were 20 minutes ago, not what they were an hour ago, but the moment that you put the key in the ignition, if you do not know at that moment what your number is, you have absolutely no right to go behind a wheel and move something that weighs over 2,000 pounds at 50 to 60, 70 miles an hour. You have no right to do that. Does that make sense? So if your children want the privilege of being able to drive, they have a very big responsibility. And the consequence of them saying, no, you can't make me is, that's fine. You don't get the key. Right? Okay. So that's just a concrete example of that, because that's about health and safety, not only for your own child, but for everybody else in the community. And to normalize burnout and plan for it. Sometimes diabetes just sucks, right? Raise your hand if you have ever had an, oh my God, this so sucks moment. There cannot be anybody that has their hands down, right? Okay, so, and our children feel that way too, of course they do. So we can normalize it, that's part of life. There are other things in our lives that also are just exhausting. Everybody gets burned out about a variety of different things. The problem with diabetes is it is never ending. Never, ever ending. And just because you've had 2, 3, 4 days in a row, maybe 2 weeks, where you've just threaded the needle, like everything is just like, my gosh, you are never under 70 and you haven't been over 200 in 2 weeks. Whoa, I've got diabetes down. And then there's literally the next 48 hours where you can't get it under 280. No matter what, no matter how many times you angry bolus, you can't get it down, right? So there are times when that happens because that's diabetes. That goes back to that. The bottom line is it's not about parents, it's not about children, it's about diabetes. And it is hard. And to let your child know that you have those moments and to be able to talk about it and normalize it, to predict for them that they are going to have those moments and to normalize it is actually a gift to them, because they're going to learn how to handle the ups and downs of all aspects of their life. Does that make sense? Okay, so our brains. This is one of the reasons that adolescence is hard. This is a picture from the NIH using functional MRI images. The more green and yellow you are, the less your brain is done developing, okay? And then the older you get, the more purple you get, the more your brain is done, okay? So our frontal lobes right here, which are responsible for things like planning ahead, understanding risks, thinking about, like, is this a good idea? Like, this is, oh my God, there was this great study where they asked teenagers and adults, is it a good idea if you? Is it a good idea if you go swimming with sharks? Is it a good idea to light your hair on fire? Should you drink Drano? So here's the thing that was different. Not the answer, how long it took to get the answer. So grown-ups were like, no, no, no. And kids were like, swimming with sharks. That would be a great story for me to tell my friends. That would be, but I could die. Okay, no, but it took that long. So that's frontal lobe, okay?
This is also what's happening in your child's brain. A couple other glimpses into the brain.
This is their ability to be seen in public with mom and dad.
Their judgment gland is very small. Rebellion center is large. Good.
Sex is large.
Everything is boring, as you can see. Boring, boring, boring. Everything's boring. You're boring me, Mom. So interdependence is key. I challenge you to take the word independence out of your vocabulary. This goes back to the point that this is not DIY. We are not raising children to become alone, to become independent. We are training them to become interdependent, to find the people in their lives that can support them. No one is ever truly independent. Support, collaboration, teamwork, all the things we've been talking about are the most important processes to help your teen or your child become an adult living a long, happy, healthy, productive, wonderful, satisfying life with diabetes. You want to facilitate interdependence, minimize judgment, minimize shame, share daily demands, because otherwise this can happen. Your mother and I are feeling overwhelmed, so you'll have to bring yourselves up.
So one of the things that I'd like you guys to think about as parents as we're doing this workshop is to just stop and ask yourselves some questions. So how do you guys as a family communicate? How do you have conversations, and when do you have conversations? I found raising my children that I had the best, most interesting conversations when I was driving the car, right? This is also the time that I talked about condoms, because they could not jump out of the car while it was driving, and so I could have a conversation that they did not want to have. But how do you problem solve as a family? How do you resolve disagreements? Is there a sense that your children actually have something that's worthy of consideration that they can bring to the table and you will actually listen to it? So listening is not the same thing as agreeing, right? So I can say, so your perspective is that you should be able to whatever it is. Okay, yes, that's my perspective. Okay. No. And it's okay to say no. It's always okay to say no. But you want to be able to first make sure that they know that you have heard their perspective. And then it's not no because I said so. It's no because, and there are almost always bazillions of good reasons for us to say no to our children. The other thing is, how do you communicate and problem solve and collaborate differently as your child gains more and more independence? And then how do you...
Interdependence, Jill.
Interdependence. Did we...
No, we're dropping independence, remember?
Yes,
I just said take it out of your vocab.
Thank you. And then, see...
I know.
The word is there.
I need to put a big red line through interdependence.
Okay. But
Homework
so how do we do these things? And I can tell you that one of the things that I hear a lot of teenagers say is that when their parents talk to them about diabetes-specific topics, their tone of voice is fundamentally different than when they talk about anything else, school, friends, work, anything. I had one young lady tell me that her mother had 7 different ways of saying okay. And she knew when she was in deep, deep doo-doo trouble and when things were really fine based on the tone of her mother's voice with that 2-letter word. So I will challenge you to just think about that and even ask your children, do you think that my tone of voice is different when we talk about blood sugars and different things than when we talk about other things? And they'll be like, duh, yeah. And you'll, really? They'll be like, don't you pay attention to yourself? So it's an interesting conversation to have with your children.
So one of the strategies that we like to encourage to change that cycle of focusing on the negative and worrying so much is to focus on the positive. Despite the challenges, things happen. Stuff is good. There are good things that happen during your day. Some people talk about that even though diabetes is hard, it's brought new things to our life. It's introduced us to a community that we enjoy. It's helped us be closer as a family. It's helped us learn how to problem solve and communicate about challenging things. But one of the things that I think is really important is to really think about what are some of the positive experiences that your family has had. And you don't have to say, thank God we have diabetes. I'm not saying that. But what are some of the positive experiences we've had? And what is going well with diabetes management? What did my team do well today? Maybe they just did one thing right. Maybe they just checked their blood sugar once. Or maybe they just
Maybe your son flushed the toilet.
Right.
Thank you.
Right, exactly. But find that one thing and pay attention to it, both for you and for them. This is why nagging doesn't work. Stop overeating, stop drinking, stop staying out late, stop fighting, stop worrying, stop eating sweets, stop gambling. What did the doctor say? I don't know, I stopped listening. Nagging doesn't work. So what are some things that you can do to encourage the diabetes management behavior that you want to see? The first is, like we were saying, focus on the things that are going well. Focus on praise over punishment. Catch your child doing diabetes management well. Make an effort to find one thing every day that they did right and tell them how great it was. And celebrate every diabetes success. And by diabetes success, I don't mean the number. By diabetes success, I mean the behavior. I mean the checking. I mean the telling you, hey, Mom, it was really hot out and I just had to have that Slurpee and now it's 3:50 and I don't know what to do. Thank you so much for telling me. Now we can figure out.
And I hope the Slurpee was delicious. Now let's figure out,
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
No. So
Oh, that's this one.
Yeah. Keep going.
Yeah, just reinforcing the behaviors, not the numbers. Blood glucose and A1C are data. They sometimes feel like grades. Has everyone ever felt like they're getting a grade from the doctor? Yes. They're not. They're information. So communicating to your child, this is information that helps us decide what to do next. We're not being evaluated. This is what helps us decide what to do next. And again, focusing on praising the behaviors that you want to see more of. Listening works better than nagging, so finding a communication system that works well for your family. We talked about that. And asking about something other than diabetes first. If you use CGM, that's a gift to you because it allows you to not say, hey, what's your number? It allows you to say, hey, how did that test go today? Or hey, what's going on with your friend? I know she was pretty stressed out yesterday. How's she feeling? And so being able to talk to them about something before you start launching into the diabetes conversation. And then problem solving together. Avoiding commands, avoid unsolicited advice. And really being open-minded about everyone's ideas and input. What do you think the solution is to this problem? Oh, that's interesting. What about this? And then talking through the pros and the cons of the different solutions. Even if you're going to end up with the suggestion that you as parent make, walking your child through the process of being able to come up with a few ideas and evaluate those ideas and then pick the best one is an important skill set, even if you're going to get to the same solution for that particular diabetes challenge. Does that make sense?
So siblings, right? So my gosh, they have going through just as much as your child with diabetes, right? They live with diabetes too. In many ways, they have diabetes too. How many of you have a sibling who has said things like, I wish I also had diabetes? Mm-hmm. How many of you have siblings that will say things like, I feel really, really worried when my brother or sister goes low or when their Dexcom goes off because I'm afraid that they're not going to do well? Or somebody that runs and gets them a juice box or gets them glucose tablets or something like that. Or goes in the middle of the night and says, don't you hear the Dexcom beeping? I've been up for now 3 minutes and you haven't woken up. And right, okay. So brothers and sisters are amazing and they feel this just as much as everybody else in the family, and it's important to give them permission and a space to be able to talk about their experiences, their worries, their fears, and also whether or not they're also feeling like, hello, I'm part of the family too? Do you remember me? And to give them some ways and permission to say that I'm part of the family too, because you don't want them to express that after they've kicked the dog or broken your very favorite vase or done something else that really gets a lot of your undivided attention, but not in a way that's really positive for them. So how do they have space and permission to not only express their worries and concerns, but also that I'm part of the family too and I deserve just as much attention as my brother or sister with diabetes, right? And so all of that, that's also part of being a family with a child with diabetes.
The last and I think probably most foundational messages that we have for families is that taking care of you is taking care of your child. Parents give and give and give and give and take care and take care and take care and say, I'll take care of myself tomorrow. But at some point, you get to a point that you can't give anymore because you are so exhausted, you get yourself sick, you are so stressed, you're angry, and it makes it so much harder to avoid that cycle that we talked about because you are just completely tapped out. So being able to talk about your experiences, to ask for support, to not try to do it all alone, and to take time for your own needs is taking care of your family. It is the most important thing you can do to take care of your family. It's like on airplanes, you put the thing on yourself before you put it on the baby, because if you don't put it on yourself, you can't take care of that baby or that child or that teenager or that young adult. And so asking for help, finding somebody that you can ask to help you with something is one of the best things that you can do to take care of your child. And the next one more slide says that self-care is not selfish. So I have a homework assignment for you. Your homework assignment, even if you feel like you have a lot of support, I want you to think about who's one person you can ask to do one thing to help you with diabetes. It can be someone you meet here today. It can be someone in your family. It can be a friend of yours, an old friend from school. It can be someone in your neighborhood. It can be something tiny. It can be, I really don't have time to go pick up the dry cleaning because things are so busy and crazy right now and I have to take my kid to the endocrinologist and to soccer and I have to do this and that. Here's the $20. Can you go pick up my dry cleaning for me? That's asking for help in a way that would reduce one thing off of your to-do list. So think of it. Try to think of one person who can do something for you and ask them to help you out. Setting aside a time for your own needs, again, helps you take care of your family. So think about what energizes you and what relaxes you. Think about what can you fit into your schedule to take care of you and who can help you make a little time for yourself. So these are all things that are important for you to teach your child how to do, but will also make you more prepared to take care of your child. The last thing is that diabetes is serious. We know that it's serious. We heard a lot about complications this morning and very intense things that can happen, but funny stuff also happens. There are moments that you just think like, I cannot even believe this just happened to me. I can't believe I'm in this situation. So we only have a couple minutes left, but if anyone has a funny story to share, something funny that's happened with diabetes, sure.
One day I went to my son's school to change his, One day I went to my son's school to change his set, and I was in such a hurry because I had to go to my other son's school. So I'm preparing everything. I have the set ready, and I'm about to poke it, and I was like, ouch! I turned it the opposite way, and I poked myself. I was like, that does hurt.
Right. I guess you're right. That hurts. Exactly.
Yeah.
Any other funny stories in our last minute or two?
Where's the weirdest place you found a blood sugar strip? Attached to the dog, in your underwear drawer. I mean, where's the craziest place you've ever found a strip?
My oldest son, who doesn't have type 1, is a wrestler, and he sent me a picture from the wrestling room. And I don't know how it got there, but there was one of our test strips there.
There you go.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
You have a mic coming.
Oh,
They play
we
guess the
sometimes
blood
play
sugar
this game like guess the blood sugar, so just to get her out of bed or something. And so in some ways it's good. My daughter's a perfectionist, but then sometimes it's not. So we guess the blood sugar, and she's like 175, and I'm like, well, 140 or something, and it was 175.
Wow. It's
She just said it, and it was, and I'm like,
That's
yeah,
the day that you actually buy a lottery ticket.
yeah, you
Right.
are the perfectionist. Yeah, exactly.
That's great.
That's good.
You had your hand up, I think. Did you have your hand up?
We were at the park, and another parent asked what the thing on his arm was for his Dex, and I told her it was a GPS, and she looked at me and she said, "Oh wow!" I I did end up telling her what it really was, but I couldn't have carried it further in the conversation without just
I like that.
losing any thought.
I love it.
Yeah.
That's great.
Good. Good.
I just thought the funniest place that we have found test strips are when we're out and we're on a tour or we're out somewhere having fun and it's like, oh, okay, someone else here has got diabetes.
Right. Yep.
I know what that is.
You find your community. So I want to be aware of the time, and I know it's lunchtime. We are around at lunch, so please come up and chat with us. We also, Jill is doing a presentation in the afternoon about distress and burnout, and then in the later afternoon, I'm doing a talk or a chat again about transitions from diagnosis all the way through young adulthood and different transitions in self-management.
Thank you so much
Thank
for your
you guys.
time. Thanks.